Hello, and welcome to our Q&A for the short film Being Someone Else. I am Joanne Parsont. I'm the Director of Education for the California Film Institute. My pronouns are she and her. I am a white 50-something woman with round, dark-rimmed glasses and light brown curly hair. I'm wearing a gray collared shirt and silver hooped earrings, sitting in a home office with a bookshelf on one side of me and a printer and a vase of sunflowers on the other. It is my great pleasure to welcome our two guests. I'd like to first introduce the director of Being Someone Else, Øyvind Aamli. If you want to do a quick introduction of yourself, Øyvind.
Yeah, my name is Øyvind Aamli. I'm originally from Norway, but I live in London. I'm wearing a grey cap and a blue shirt, and I'm sitting in my living room at the moment with some wooden panels behind me. And yeah, I'm the director of Being Someone Else.
And David Nicholas, the composer of the film.
Hi, yes, my name is David Nicholas. I am the composer, and I am a film composer and a music producer here in London also. And I do tend to wear dark-rimmed glasses quite regularly. I am sat here in my black t-shirt and with in my bedroom, in fact, with a cream wall behind me.
Lovely. Thank you both so much for joining us today. So just to start out, Øyvind, if you could tell us how you first met Imogen and why you wanted to make a film about them.
Yeah, I made a film before I made the film Being Someone Else about belonging in school and the importance of belonging in school and the effect that has on learning. And that kind of whetted my appetite a little bit to continue looking into belonging in school. And then I did more research around that and found out some quite horrible statistics around, school exclusions and sort of the ultimate exclusions, which unfortunately happens a lot around people with special education needs and people with autism. And it was on the up, the statistics were as on the up. So I knew that I wanted to make a film about that. And I also knew that I wanted to tell a story that was from the point of view of someone that had been excluded. It took me a little while to sort of find someone, but I've known Imogen and her family for a long time, and that it kind of became natural. So when I spoke to her back then, it was part of my research to understand how she was feeling about this, and that then became. So I asked her, "Would you be interested in being in the film?" And she was very much interested in that, and it had some, restrictions. She didn't want a big crew or anything. She just wanted me because she knew me already. So that's how it started, really. Yeah.
And so you were telling me earlier, so that she's actually now going by they them pronouns, and she's opted to change her name to May, correct? So
that's correct. Yeah. So sorry, I should have said that before I answered that question, but yeah. So in the film, she's known as Imogen, but in the last few months, she wants to be known as May, and she's changed her name to May, and her pronouns are they and them.
Great. So we'll refer to May as May, and going forward, just so there's no confusion for everyone else.
So before I met May, or before I started working with May, I did a film about belonging in school and the effects that has on young people's learning. And that is a subject that's quite close to my heart from growing up and not really feeling like I was belonging in school when I was growing up myself. And after that film was finished, I wanted to go deeper, and I did more research around belonging in school and found some quite horrible statistics around school exclusions here in the UK, in London, where I'm living at the moment. And also that these exclusions usually happen with people with special needs and also autistic children. So that's where it started, really. I knew that May had been excluded from school. So I contacted her family, asked if I could speak to them about that. And I asked then May if she wanted to be part of the film. I thought, May would really hurt the story that they would tell would be interesting. So and May was really up for that, and that's when it started, really.
Great. So so the element of cosplay that comes into the film was sort of evolved out of your conversations with May, as far as, you know, what the focus would be. Did you know that kind of going in, as far as how you wanted to, you know, because like you said, you wanted to make a film sort of about that sense of exclusion, but what I think is so great about your film is that it really focuses so much more on the ways that she finds to manage that, or, you know, to counterbalance that, so that you get less information about the exclusion and more about her own ways of finding her place.
Yeah, I think that's what's quite exciting about documentary in a way, because I think that's always something that drives you towards wanting to make a film about a specific topic. But I'm always interested in the human stories about that. So it was important that that was the character story is the main story, and then everything else just becomes sort of around it, and the topic comes out of that character story. So May really loves cosplay, and that's something that they mentioned to me really early on. We tried a few different other aspects, so I was part of their everyday sort of life for a few weeks, and tried to sort of find an angle, and cosplay was so important to me that I kind of felt that had to be the angle. And that is something that May would do, you know, almost every day. They would go up to her room and create these different characters and become these different characters, if you like. And then after a few months, there was a cosplay convention coming up, and so I filmed May, as you see in the film, you know, up to this cosplay convention, and that becomes then the main story, the main spine of the story.
Right. So David, at what point did you join the project, and can you maybe talk a little bit about your collaboration with Øyvind and how in composing the film score?
Yeah, of course. I was brought in onto the project around the time when shots of the film were being put together in some way enough to present. Øyvind had shown me, was able to present to me and show me the story as a whole, and a number of shots that he'd put together. It wasn't in any way a finished product or a complete film, but it was enough for me to look at and get a sense of who May is and was in you know, in that period, and then we went from there, and we sit down and we watch the film together, or the rough cuts, and we watch it a couple of times, and we take I get a sense of what is being presented to me, really. And first off, my main thing I look for is whether I can connect with the material, and which I did very quickly. I love factual stories. I love factual film where we are being allowed in to a smaller, more intimate perspective of someone's life, which you might not see. So someone like May, for example, you wouldn't see them from hearing the story about their experience in school. You wouldn't really get to see, if you're at school, that creative side of them, where they're cutting up paper and creating, drawing all these designs and creating these costumes, and it's those little insights into people's lives that I think I do find really appealing, because it's just, it feels like you're there almost. And so that was the thing that attracted me, and I've known Øyvind for a long time, and knew that he was very talented, and that's something I wanted to be involved in. And then we start talking about the feel of the film and the emotions that are associated with it. So what the arc of the story, and what we want to present to the audience in terms of the sort of emotional journey that we go on to portray. And then you essentially get this sort of big, it's intimate, it's very, very it's quite deep, because May had a difficult time at school, and is spending most of the time at home, but then there's this real release of this convention at the end where you feel like there's a real celebration. I mean, it's just a snippet of the story, but it's something that I really enjoyed working on, because it was very close, and there wasn't a lot going on, but it was very specific, and given in a quite a succinct manner, so that the audience can just get a real sense of who this person is and what they do over quite a short period of time, actually.
Well, so I'm wondering too, Øyvind, were you ever tempted to make this a longer piece, or, like what goes into the decision of the length of a film, and knowing that that's a sufficient part to tell her story? Particularly, like you said, there's barely a reference. I mean, there's a reference to her school experience, but obviously we don't go there. And so I'm just, wondering how you make that decision about the compactness of the film.
Yeah, that's a good question. I spent quite a lot of time going a bit back and forth, actually. Originally, it was going to be a short. Then I decided it was going to be a longer, maybe like a mid-length, 40 minutes, because I had quite a lot of footage. I spent time with them before the cosplay convention. That footage did tell a story, but it didn't sort of have any forward-moving element to it. And that's kind of, in a way, I wanted to portray that as well, because that was their reality. That was May's reality. Nothing was happening. May was at home every day, homeschooled. She had, they had very sort of feeling very isolated. Yes, I did want to make it longer. When we looked back over the rushes, I think it's always this kind of compromise of making a film that's documenting something, but that's also engaging. For me, it felt like it was good if it had like quite a clear goal from the beginning, and it was the best way for me to represent May, just moving forward to this cosplay convention. And it still had the moments where I felt anyway that it had the moments where May was isolated, and I specifically chose this very narrow lens, so to try and portray that, and even that took me quite a long time to sort of figure out. So those rushes that we spent beforehand, the filming that we did beforehand, was part of figuring out that language, so that when we did go to the sort of spine that becomes the film, I felt personally that I had the visual language, and that's when it sort of came together. So that was a long answer to your question, but
no, this is a good answer. And kind of in counterpoint to the visual language that you were just talking about, I'm wondering if you could both talk a little bit about the audio language, and the importance of music and sound. I think a lot of times people think with documentary, they don't really think about how it's just as important as it might be in a narrative film to develop your tone and your feel. And I'm wondering if you could just particularly, David, from your perspective, about how you crafted how you composed it, and what you thought would really help tell the story. And then maybe, Øyvind, from your perspective of why you knew you needed someone like David, to really bring that together.
Yeah, with regards to the difference between factual film documentaries and fictional film, fantasies, thrillers, sci-fi, you treat them all the same, really, because it's still character focused, it's still story driven, and it's just the thing that you're presenting is real life, and so I still treat it the same as was any other film, but at the same time focusing on just that film. It's making this, trying to find something that fits the world that May lives in and represents, and with regards to the music and the style, and it's finding a language to represent May and what they do and how they work. And Øyvind had come to me with some ideas, musical ideas, because he's very musically knowledged, which is great. Not always the case with directors, and that's okay. But Øyvind came with me with some ideas, and we looked at those, and I workshopped some ideas around that sort of style. And I think it's a small story. It's single character focused, so we weren't going to go with a big orchestra or lots of drums or anything like that. It was the intention behind it was to keep it small, keep it intimate. It's still I think the plan was to sort of reflect not just what you see, but kind of what's going on internally, and thoughts, feelings, emotions that might be feeling at particular times. We even put a bit of music for the car journey on the way to the convention. It's all just if you're going to an event that is really important for you, that you spent a lot of time preparing for, on the journey, on the way to that, you're going to feel apprehension, you're going to feel excited but nervous. And so it was just trying to pick out those little elements, keep it small. There's not a lot going on in the music, and it can easily be overdone. And so we would go back and forth. So I would compose some pieces along to some of the shots, and we go back and forth on whether this works, or maybe we should try this, or how about we give this a go, and coming to a point where it's very much a collaborative effort, as it should be, and constantly trying to support what is going on screen, and not draw attention to myself, but giving sort of the focus and the attention to the character, to the story, and then we end up with something we're happy with, and we fine-tune it, and those are the things that get used in the end on the final edit.
Øyvind, do you want to talk all about why what you felt the music really needed to be, and how you knew that David was the right person to to collaborate with, to bring the film to what you wanted?
Absolutely. So I think there's a couple of things when it comes to the music. When you make a documentary, it's sometimes hard to show what goes on inside someone's, like the inner struggles and the inner conflicts. And I think music is really important there to sort of heighten those emotions and what you want the audience to feel, and how. So me spending time with May helps me to understand how May feels. But that's very difficult to put on screen without adding some music to it. And sometimes it happens and it works, but sometimes you need a bit of help from the music. And I think music's really powerful that way. And that's one of the things I wanted from David, really, to help heighten those moments, particularly the first moments of music in the film, which happens just after May has a sensory overload. And they explain that. So it's this inner dialogue, and I think that really works. What David did with the violins and just made it really reflective. And the other thing I really wanted with music was to represent May's personality. So May listens to music a lot, and so I obviously knew what they were listening to, and so I brought that in with our conversations with me and Dave, to sort of represent her, represent them. May obviously is, when I'm filming her, I don't just want people to feel sorry for them in the situation. I think it's very important for me as a documentary filmmaker to show the other sides of that personality. And May is fun. She has a huge. They have a huge personality, and that was really important for me to get through. And I think again, the music really helped, particularly towards the end, because that's the type of music that that May would listen to.
Right. So you said at the beginning that that May was really eager to take part. Can you just talk a little about how she felt about being filmed as it was happening, and also how how their parents felt about the project?
Yeah. So I've known May's parents for about 10 years. I contacted May's parents first, naturally, and then their mum asked May if if there was even an interest there. What I was quite surprised about was that May straight away wanted to be involved. I was told there was some other film crews that had wanted to make a film about them, and is a bigger crew, but they didn't know anything about them. So I think the fact that I already knew May, that from I remember May as a 4-year-old grabbing one of my daughter's cheeks, and I think that had a big it really made it a safe space for them, if that makes sense. Now the day-to-day filming, there were days that May didn't want to be filmed, and that was fine. I'd spend the day just sort of waiting around, but that was important for me as well, because it really helped me to understand the part that we just talked about, which is that she was isolated pretty much, and that feeling became very strong for me when I was there, and they just didn't want to calm down. Again, I think with documentary, it's easy to sort of walk away thinking, I didn't get anything. But I think those days are some of the most important ways to understand someone. And then as we sort of became more and more part of her creativity and May making things, and it became, I think she became more, I think May become more and more safe with me and the camera. And I think one thing that I always found very amazing about May is that they didn't sort of make any signs that I was filming, if that makes sense. So and May wouldn't look into the camera, for example. Other films that I film, people would look into the camera and be very aware of the camera. May didn't really. It was like it was just part of me, if that makes sense. The camera and me was the same person,
right?
And that was really helpful.
And so, how does May feel about the film now? I'm presuming she's seen it and wondering what her response is about how it's turned out.
Yeah, May's really happy with it. And her family's really happy with it. May's now 14, coming 15, and a lot of things are happening in her life. So May also feels like this is a chapter that's a few years ago, if that makes sense. Even though the film was finished, last autumn, with the editing process, for her, actually, if we stopped filming as COVID happened, so that's a year ago. And for a 14, 15-year-old, that feels like a long time. But yeah, she's really happy with it. And when I was part of that time of her life, what was nice to see, just going back to the filming a little bit as well, was that for May to have someone to show up every day and showing interest in their life actually changed how they were feeling about themselves. So that as well, I think, is another side to filmmaking, which I find quite interesting.
Yeah. And how are they back in school now? What's the situation with May and school?
So May was accepted to another school towards the end of last year. It's been because of COVID. It's been schools have been a bit on and off here, but she now has a place in the school, which has been very, very positive.
Great. That's great. So what would you most like viewers to take away from this film?
I think what I'd like the film to do is to open people's minds a little bit about that we're all different, and the idea of neurodiversity and autism. I think autism is such a big word, and we forget the people behind the big word sometimes. And May is one of those people behind that word. And like May says themselves, every autistic person is different. And that's really important as well, I think. So I think I want people to walk away with that we need to create more room to be different. And in classrooms, workplaces, in society in general. And just create space, really, to try and understand each other, have a bit more of an open mind instead of putting labels on it. I think I like the way things are going with, we're talking about neurodiversity, which opens it up to being a bit more open, and I think a new word as well. It really helps for it to be not like, I think autism has a bit of a negative connotation to it, and I think that needs to change, because May is proud to be autistic. Doesn't want to be anything else, and I think that's really important to get across.
Yeah. Well, I think you did a really wonderful job with the film. It was a pleasure to get to meet May, to hear their story, and appreciate the work that you both did on this great film. So thank you both so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and good luck with your next projects.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Thank you so much for having us and being
Absolutely.
someone else as part of the festival.
Yeah, thank you.